Hello and welcome to episode 57 of Throwin Elbows. I'm Dan Doherty, the senior editor of Cageside Press. Alongside me is Heath, Harshman, one of our star writers, star podcaster, and a two-time picks champion. So welcome to Throwin Elbows, where we review all the latest in Broadway hits. This week I got to see Pretty Woman. Yes, the remake of the 80s rom-com hit that was, I had Julie Roberts as a lead. And it was a solid remake. It's nothing to write home about. I would say Wicked is a better play if you want to get a lot of bang for your buck. But overall, it's just for a nice night out, Pretty Woman's going to get it done.
Well, and I know people might be a little disappointed that we aren't covering MMA or UFC talk, but it's not like anything's happened since
nothing.
Our last episode. The world of Broadway or off Broadway is booming right now and has been for a while. There's nothing going on in MMA or in the UFC that we need to discuss anyways. So we'll get to it when we get to it. But until then, this is the show now. And Throwin Elbows, I don't know, there's some dance moves on Broadway. Throwin Elbows, we can repackage this pretty easy. Yeah.
I can change the logo.
That's our threshold. There's elbows there.
They do have elbows, those actors. Yeah.
Good to know.
All right. Well, in actuality, it's a packed episode this week in the MMA world, and you can follow our written work on CagesidePress.com. On Twitter, we're at Throwin Elbows, where you can get our reviews of all the Broadway hits, and SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher, Throwin Elbows MMA.
You can't do that. I'm the one that runs the fucking social media.
I honestly don't have the password to the social media.
Well, and there's a reason,
Yes.
Danny. I don't trust you because now, God, I mean, it might help. I don't know. Our engagement isn't exactly great right now, so maybe I need to change it up with that a little bit. I know I've been thinking about live tweeting an event from the account or something like that, or trying to spice it up a little bit. But fuck it, let's just talk about musicals and shit.
Yes.
Something I definitely know tons about, but we shouldn't delve into any further.
So this week, we will talk about UFC 238 and 239. They have both got their main events scheduled, and I think both of them were today, right? It was the 238 was, that's the main event. So both of those were announced today, this afternoon, really, not too long before this taping. And a couple of high-profile UFC fighters are changing weight classes, and Conor McGregor's future is as foggy as ever. But first, UFC Nashville happened over the weekend, and in the main event, pretty stunning. Anthony Pettis knocks out Stephen Thompson with a Superman punch with just 5 seconds to go in the second round. Thompson was winning this fight, and I mean, this was a fight that I kind of wanted to see go long because Anthony Pettis actually was looking solid with his leg kicks, and they seemed to be doing a number on Thompson, so I wonder what that fight would have looked like in rounds 4 and 5, but, Showtime didn't let us see rounds 4 and 5 with that big Superman punch. Wonderboy's never been knocked out, and this is the first time he's ever been knocked out in his kickboxing career, MMA career, all that stuff. His first time ever being knocked out is by a lightweight who moved up for the first time since a long time, and this is why you have the fights, because, I mean, the week before we were just saying, how does Anthony Pettis win this fight? I don't know. And we just saw it. He won the fight with a great Superman punch with his back to the cage. It's his first KO win since knocking out Donald Cerrone in 2013, and that was a body kick, too. So this is this is a different kind of knockout. But really, It wasn't just the punch that was good about Anthony Pettis' performance. He really looked good overall.
Yeah, you could tell that he had a game plan, and that him and Duke, I don't know if it's wow. We need to have a new timer for how long it takes me to talk about Ariel's stupid fucking MMA chat hour. It's not stupid. I actually enjoy it quite a bit. But Pettis on there gave a lot of credit to their game plan, because they knew right away that you can't just go and fight Stephen Thompson without a strategy. You have to have some sort of plan. Whether it's the right plan or the wrong plan, you have to have a plan. You can't go in there because he has a plan, and his works more often than not. And it was working for the vast majority of that fight. But Pettis' did too. You were right about those leg kicks. They were definitely forcing Thompson with someone with that much movement and that good of footwork. And, Pettis can do some stuff, but his footwork isn't exactly, great. I don't know. He had it was a great strategy. He looked really impressive. He was calm. He talked about the bloody nose. I thought in the fight that it was a little more, doing a little more damage and causing a little more trouble for Pettis. But I mean, I'm also a wimp and get really annoyed whenever I have like a normal bloody nose, not when a giant guy is hitting me with jabs that are so fucking fast. I was really like, as much as it's hard to talk about, both guys fought well. I thought it was a really good fight and a fun fight and something that the card really needed. Stephen Thompson looked really good.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be mad about a performance like that where you just kind of get caught by a guy that is good at catching people like that. Like, as much as Anthony Pettis has been on a little bit of a rough run in his last 10 or so fights, I think that was his 4th win in his last 10. He's still Anthony fucking Pettis. Like, that's still a former lightweight champ that you got to respect. And obviously Thompson did and was fighting smart and doing his thing, and he just got caught. And like you said, that's why you have these kind of fights. That's why you do stuff like this. And it's one of those where we both picked Wonder Boy. I picked Wonder Boy in the Slack group and everything. But even right as the fight was about to start, and I don't even dislike Wonder Boy. I know some people don't like him. But I put in the Slack chat, I had to say, we're all rooting for Pettis, right? And the lack of reaction I got kind of surprised me, because there's just something, and I've never been a huge Pettis guy either, but I wanted to see him win this fight because, kind of like you said, we were not sure that if he was going to do that, how it was going to happen, and he didn't disappoint. And I think the card definitely needed it, and it's hard to not be happy for a guy like Pettis who reached really high heights, got the Wheaties box and everything, and kind of been on a rough run, and to come out there like that, it's. The MMA world is kind of crazy now. There's a lot of options for him now at 155 and 170, where maybe 12 months ago, 18 months ago, we're wondering where the hell Pettis goes from here. Now he has more options than he's had in a long time, and that's a win for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a great performance by Stephen Thompson. He looked better than he had in a while. Like, he was a lot more active. Like, in his last couple fights, the Darren Till fight, the Woodley fight, he was doing a lot more sitting back. But this one, he was really pushing the action in this, and the first round, it was Anthony Pettis kind of with his arms up, his chin tucked, and just walking forward, and not really doing much. I'm like, where's the game plan here? And then the second round, he starts unleashing those kicks over and over again, and they're really connecting really well on Thompson, and then at the end there, it was a spinning back kick that missed for Thompson, and then right off that, Pettis throws the Superman punch, and gets the knockout. So.
And I think a big part of Thompson coming forward is that some of the guys he's been fighting recently, whether it's Masvidal, who is another kind of, I hate the phrase like blown up lightweight, because they're all giant dudes, but when you're fighting Darren Tills and Wonder Boy, or not Wonder Boy, when you're fighting Woodley, those are guys that it's hard to be super active against. You don't necessarily want to be active against. Pettis is a guy that is going to come forward regardless. Like you said, he's going to tuck his chin and just kind of go. And I think that's kind of what helped this a lot, is that Thompson could go in there, be confident, know he had the range. And that was something that Pettis also brought up in the Helwani interview, was he's never felt someone's range like that. He'd think he was out of range, then all of a sudden get kicked or get popped. And I think that was, like you said, an accurate description of the first round, where Pettis just had to get out there and figure out what he was up against, because when you've never fought it at welterweight and you have more recent experience at 145 than you do at 170, and you're going up against one of a top 5 in the division and one of the bigger guys at that, it's going to take a minute to get used to it. And he definitely went in there and adjusted, and I don't know that I would necessarily ever have considered Anthony Pettis like a super high fight IQ. To me, he's always been more of a tools guy. He knows what tools he has, and he's going to go in there and see which one works, but I'd never consider him a super intelligent fighter. But he fought very, very smart and went in there and did exactly what he had to do. If they fight 100 times, however many of the times that Pettis wins, I think a lot of them end up looking like that, where instead of maybe getting the surprise finish like that, maybe we're talking about a fight like you mentioned at the beginning of it, where it gets into the 4th or 5th round, and all of a sudden Thompson's footwork is not what it was, in that first round, where he was able to control the range really well.
Yeah, and Thompson, he might not seem it, but he's 36. He's got a lot of fight wearing on him. So he had that long kickboxing career, undefeated, 58-0, and 19 MMA fights later, he's taken quite a bit of damage. Despite his fighting style, because he's been hit, and this first time he's been knocked out. But he took some shots in both the Darren Till fight, the Woodley fights. He was in danger. So where does Thompson go from here? He's a guy that was at the top of the division, and it seemed to be a guy that benefited a lot from Woodley losing the belt, because then you have the guy that's been the top contender for a really long time immediately, at the front of the line to get a shot at Usman, but now he is sent back down the ladder. So where does Thompson go from here?
I think this is a don't panic situation. We literally just got done talking about how good he looked. He looked really fast. He was looking fine. The reason that fight was so impressive from Pettis is because it's like, yeah, he was landing those leg kicks, but if he goes out there and loses the first 4 rounds and maybe wins the 5th because Thompson's legs, it still looks like a domination win from Thompson despite, Pettis' solid game plan. He got caught, and he's obviously, like you said, he's 36. He's been dropped in 4 of his last 5 fights. And it didn't take, like, that shot from Pettis also. We don't know what a 170-pound Pettis hits like. Mm-hmm. And he caught him so clean. Like, it wasn't even a super, super hard punch, but he caught him so clean. And it's hard to do that against Wonderboy. If we see him getting caught clean like that more in the future, I think it's a panic time. But right now, I think it's just kind of, the welterweight division is in flux, and he's kind of one of the old guard that still has a place, but right now, for the immediate future, for the rest of this year and beginning of next year ish, there's no more Wonder Boys in the title picture. He's going to need to get a couple wins. So we don't really need a Darren Till rematch, but I wouldn't necessarily hate it where both guys are right now. Okay. Ponzinibbio, maybe? That might be an interesting test for Ponzinibbio if you really want to see if he belongs in that picture. So I think those might be interesting ones, but I think that he's still got, a little bit left, and he does have a lot of wear and tear, and he is coming off of some injuries. But if you're going to tell me he's going to take that much time off and come off of those injuries, and he's going to look like that for, 9 minutes and 40 seconds, I'm going to take it all day. So okay. I'm more positive on Wonderboy than I am not right now, but maybe just, no more. He's not a top 5 welterweight contender anymore. And if that's the line that for being downhill, then fine. But I think overall, I think he's all right.
And Pettis, on the other hand, kind of, puts a monkey wrench in things with this win. He now has wins at featherweight, lightweight, and welterweight. Only Conor McGregor and Kenny Florian can say the same thing in the UFC. And in his last 8 bouts, he has not had consecutive wins or losses. So it's been a little kind of wild ride for Anthony Pettis lately, and now he gets this huge knockout. Now where does he go? It's a weird situation. I don't know if you can consider him a top contender at 170 yet, even if he's knocking out Stephen Thompson.
I don't know. Right now they have him ranked number 8 in the super official, not at all stupid or dumb UFC fighter rankings. So they gave him a lot of credit, and I think that that's deserved, especially in the way that he won. And also, 170 right now is looking a lot smaller than it used to. Like when you're looking at the guys, a lot of the guys in the top 10, whether it's RDA or Masvidal or Pettis, those are former lightweights. Like, they're not huge guys. Woodley's not exactly a huge guy for how big he is. He's not huge for how huge he is. So I don't know. I would prefer Pettis to stay at 170. I know he called out Conor, and that fight kind of got me excited a little bit. But obviously, who knows what's going on with that, and we'll get to that later. But a rematch with RDA sounds really interesting. And obviously, RDA is a little busy right now, welcoming Kevin Lee to welterweight, which we'll also get to in a bit. But I like that one. So maybe end up hooking him up with one of those guys. I wouldn't hate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's things to do. The RDA called him out for
Ponzinibbio might be fun too. Now that I'm thinking about Ponzinibbio Pettis, that might even be a little more fun than Ponzinibbio Wonderboy.
Yeah, I think part of RDA's call out was that he has to fight Ponzinibbio first, and maybe when that fight gets settled, you give him the winner or the loser, whatever, like one of those guys. I think that makes sense. Yeah. So that fight will happen in a couple months, I believe. So we'll see. I don't know if an RDA rematch would really interest Pettis. So let's cross our fingers for Santiago.
He did mention it on the Ariel show. He said RDA is one that he wants like as a personal thing, and so if it makes sense, then he'll do it. I don't know. If you're gonna get RDA, now's kind of the time, right?
Maybe. I mean, he's been beat by Covington and Usman, and I guess I don't. That was just such a one-sided fight, though. I think you just let that one go.
How long ago is that now, though? Like, RDA has been to weight cut hell and back. Like, I don't like. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe not the best, but there's something about it that got me excited. Maybe I'm just still too excited from it because the rest of this card was so goddamn awful that the excitement from that knockout just feels a little bit stronger because of how awful everything else was before it.
I don't know if you listened to Kamaru Usman on the Joe Rogan podcast.
I did. I listened to a good chunk of it.
Great episode. I loved his point about enjoying winning in the ways that he does, like in just complete and utter domination, because he doesn't want those guys to want to fight him again. Like, they can't say, "Oh, I just got caught." Like, they got outright dominated for 5 rounds, 3 rounds, and I mean that's what happened to Pettis. So I was wondering if that was kind of the same frame of mind, but looks like Pettis has a reason to be a champion in his mind.
My favorite part was how much he just wanted to stomp out Colby Covington.
That was
like,
fun,
I don't
too.
know.
That was fun,
you
too.
could tell he went from, like, because he was pretty comfortable with Joe and everything, but just the quick, like, semi-seriousness, like, oh, ha, 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 oh, wait, no, he's...
I will beat him with the wrath of every immigrant.
Yeah, like, it's hard not to get worked up about that, so hopefully that gets announced soon, too.
So, also on this UFC Nashville card, co-main event, Curtis Blaydes completely dominated Justin Willis. It wasn't even really competitive at all. Very easy win. And then he had the quote of the night when he yelled out, "Big Titty, go home." So obviously a play on Justin Willis's figure and his nickname of Big Pretty. So that was clever from Curtis Blaydes, and Justin Willis was talking a lot of trash before the fight, and Blaydes repaid him by absolutely dominating him for 15 minutes. And he called out Stipe Miocic, Junior Dos Santos, Derek Lewis. All 3 of those guys kind of make sense for Curtis at this point.
Yeah, anybody not named Francis seems like fine. Derek Lewis is out for the next 4 to 6 months, getting his knee fixed up and actually taking, like, the first legitimate break of his UFC career. There was some talk about Stipe fighting somebody else, but Stipe's got to get in there eventually, and that sounds fun. And JDS is coming off of a win, so, like, I don't know, as kind of lackluster and stagnant as the top of that group is at heavyweight, minus the champ DC, all of those fights are interesting to me. I'd kind of prefer all of those, whatever mishmash of those you want to do, rather than Stipe JDS 3 at this point, which I thought I wanted. So I don't know. I'm glad that Blaydes won, and it was just kind of a bummer of a co-main event, because it was a fight that on a card like this sounds okay in the co-main event when you think about 2 heavyweights, heavyweights that don't lose a lot, but it was just a really, really fucking boring fight.
Yeah, it was just takedowns and takedowns and takedowns, and Willis had nothing to offer for Curtis. So Jussier Formiga, he won, and he kind of did a similar thing to as Curtis Blaydes did. He just dominated Davinson Figueiredo. Won't get the title shot, though. It was announced today that Henry Cejudo will be fighting for the bantamweight title against Marlon Moraes. So I guess Jussier Formiga versus Joseph Benavidez is on the table, and we already know who won that one in the past. It was Benavidez, and it was a first-round knockout, if I remember correctly. So, tough for Formiga. He finally got to the top. He won a number 1 contender fight, and he's still not getting that title shot.
Yeah, this is some bullshit. Like, I know that shit done changed in bantamweight and flyweight, and that things got a little murky, which we'll also get to because of my boy TJ Dillashaw, which it was a bummer. But in terms of Formiga Figueiredo, I hate it. I wrote an article last week about how the winner should get a shot at 125, and poor fucking Jussier Formiga. Like, his career is the definition of getting to number 1 contender bouts and then falling just short, whether it's against Henry Cejudo or Benavidez or Dotson or Borg. Like, he has always been that guy. And then he comes in there and beats a guy like Davidson Figueiredo, who... Davidson Figueiredo is a fucking monster. He's a guy that before the fight, or after the fight, talked about cutting 39 pounds to get to 125, which puts him at about 165, 164, and he's cutting 40 pounds. That's insane. And obviously, it came back to haunt him a little bit in this one because Formiga just was able to control him and dominate him. But That's Figueiredo's first loss of his career. It gives Formiga a 4-fight win streak, which I think matches him with Cejudo, who's the champ right now for consecutive wins. So I just, it bums me the fuck out that that another barrier is going to be there. And the fucked up thing is going to be when they do Formiga Benavidez, and it's not for an interim 125-pound title, because they, as much as they love interim belts and forcing it onto stuff, they hate flyweight. So they're definitely not going to have 2 belts in that division. The bummer is going to be when Formiga beats Benavidez and the flyweight division goes bye-bye. Cejudo beats Moraes or whatever, becomes a 135-pound champ, and then they just cut the division now that they have the reason to. And Formiga's out there with the number 1 contender coupon that goes nowhere. So, I don't know. It was a really impressive performance. Like you said, similarly kind of boring, but to me it was a little more impressive than Blade's win. I feel bad for Formiga because he's chasing a title shot that I'm not sure he's ever actually going to get. And I feel like he's earned it at this point.
Yeah, he never had the most exciting style, but he outright dominates guys at flyweight. And yeah, guys don't really stand a chance against him. And I mean, he came pretty close to beating Henry Cejudo. That was a 29-28, if I remember correctly. Might have been a split decision.
Yeah, it was split.
Yeah, it was a close clinch battle fight in that one. So yeah, he has the skills to get to the top, and he has gotten to the top, but not the top. So it's been a tough career for Formiga. And even before the UFC, he was beat by Ian McCall for McCall to get the title of best flyweight in the world. So it's just been that always the bridesmaid, never the bride kind of career for Formiga. And it just continues here. It's just bad timing. And all these factors that went into him not getting a title shot again, where TJ has to pop and Henry has to be interested in going up, and vacant title, getting a title shot. They don't have 2 very solid contenders at bantamweight right now in their mind, so they want to have Cejudo up there, yada yada. It's all that stuff, all converging into no Formiga title shot. So just tough. It's just tough to see Formiga have such a successful run right now and see this flyweight division kind of fading out as he puts together this run.
Well, especially when some of the stuff that's happening around him has nothing to do with him or the flyweights or anything.
Yeah.
But he's going to be the one that, and I don't know, I guess that's just life in general. But at the same time, that doesn't make it suck any less.
Yeah. Bryce Mitchell, I mean, I said that Curtis Blades had the line of the night, but Bryce Mitchell also made some noise in his post-fight interview, calling for some camo Reebok shorts and a roof over his camper, and he got that.
Arkansas!
Yeah, he got that $50K that he wanted. And on Twitter, he's been saying that he's in contact with Reebok, trying to get them to make some camo Reebok shorts. So we'll see his next fight. If he comes out in camo, we know he got the job done.
So does this mean the next guy that wins a fight that's kind of exciting can come out there and say, yeah, I need shorts and I want sponsors on them that can pay me for the ad revenue that's generated from my ass, or from, like, can we, is that all you have to do? You just have to scream it in a post-fight interview?
We'll see.
Is that, come on. No, I love Bryce Mitchell. He deserves the $50,000. He's an exciting fighter. That was a good win. He deserves all the luck. Not that he was lucky, but he deserves all the good things that happened to him.
Oh, because he's been very unlucky, yeah.
Yeah, the drill incident where he falls off of a 20-foot ladder and a drill in his pants. I don't know if tear is the right word. It does what a drill would do to his scrotum.
Yes.
Yeah, no, he deserves all of it. But you can't give him, because where does it stop? He wants the camo shorts, and then all of a sudden, yeah, guys are going to be out here asking for sponsors on their shorts. We can't be having that. We can't be having fighters earn extra revenue. They earn plenty. This guy has a whole camper. He has a whole fucking camper, and now he wants stylized shorts.
Come on.
Quit asking, Bryce. I mean, seems like a nice enough guy, but I mean, $50,000, you know what you can go buy? You can buy yourself some fucking camo shorts, bud. You don't bring that to Dana's office,
yeah.
All right?
We just got colors on those shorts recently. You trying to get camo? Jeez.
That's multiple colors. You know how fucking difficult that is?
And he's also gunning for a grappling fight with Ali Abdelaziz, so hopefully that
Jesus
goes through.
Christ.
Hopefully that come true.
Don't say his name. Can we bleep that out? Can we bleep out his name on here?
Yeah, I'll get the editing going. Macy Barber opened the card, and it was a tough fight. JJ Aldrich looked really good. Her boxing was very clean. Was giving Barber some issues. Knocked her down twice, And then Barber caught her with a clean left hand that sent Aldridge stumbling back towards the fence. And Barber did what she does, and that's hit hard. And she really clobbered her against the fence, and it was a standing TKO. So a good comeback win from AC Barber. And, I mean, the future might slow down a little bit, but the future's still here.
Yeah, it was impressive because it's not often that you see someone who maybe has the physical tools and the athleticism go in there and they get tooled up like that for the first round. It's rare, at least in my experience, that they are the ones that come back and are able to win the fight and look that good doing it, because it's when you know you're technically outmatched, that's pretty hard to overcome mentally, even if you do have the athleticism and the physicality on your side. And so to me, it just kind of spoke to her mental toughness. She doesn't have a ton of experience, obviously. And JJ Aldrich, you can just tell by the quickness and the smoothness and her combinations that she's been in the gym and she has a lot of experience. And that's not an easy matchup. So it was impressive, but yeah, definitely maybe a pump the brakes situation a little bit. But still, it's hard not to be impressed when you look that rough in the first round and come back and look that dominant in the second.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's cool to see a top prospect like that go through some adversity and still come out on top. Yeah, that's always a good sign. Overall, though, not a great card. That's 2 in a row, or the card's kind of like, eh. So hopefully, I mean, UFC Philadelphia is kind of guaranteed to be a banger. Let's be real.
Now you just fucked it up.
I kind of did, but it's Justin Gaethje in the main event, right? So it can't not be a banger. Like,
that's fair.
Yeah, so tough one.
I'm excited.
Tough card. I mean, we had a good main event, and I mean, it's always cool to see Anthony Pettis get a knockout win. So yeah, well, I mean, we're really looking forward to UFC Philadelphia next week.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Now it's time for news articles and stuff like that. TJ Dillashaw. He got suspended for a year, fined $10,000 by the New York State Athletic Commission, and he vacates the 135-pound title after he revealed that a USADA test came up with abnormal findings, relinquishing the belt and sending the bantamweight division into chaos. So, still don't know what he popped for, and we don't know what the whole situation will be with USADA. And he got out ahead of it, I guess, by relinquishing the title. So, I mean, I don't know if that's like an admission of guilt or something, but I mean, I don't know what to think here, because there were those pictures of him trying to cut to 125 with the absolute pharmacy on his table in front of him of pills. So maybe one of those things popped. I mean, there was those things with Cody Garbrandt where Garbrandt was like, TJ was teaching us how to juice at Team Alpha Male, and then Faber comes out and says, "Hey, I'm only surprised that it took this long for him to pop." So I mean, who knows really what to think here? But what we do know is that Dillashaw is no longer the bantamweight champion.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, Cody's an idiot. Fuck Cody Garbrandt.
That was one of the best pre-fight lines ever, because he taught us how to juice. Excuse me?
Dumb.
What?
So dumb. Yeah, no, this bums me the fuck out. I've been a TJ guy for a long time. His fights with Barao were awesome, and I don't know, like, to me, it was one of those ones where, like, oh, I'm a TJ guy. Like, him doing that, like, unseating Barao and becoming the champ and all the different things that have happened. I thought he won the fight with Cruz, so it probably shows how much of a homer I am. But this bummed me out, because as much as I wanted flyweight and bantamweight to go their separate ways, I also still wanted him to get quote-unquote revenge on Cejudo and actually have that fight, that rematch happen. And yeah, no, it's such a bad look, because he was on Rogan not that long ago talking about his system and talking up the weight cut and everybody around him and his team and everything, and now all that looks terrible. And the stuff you mentioned, the stuff with Cody and everything like that, it's just, in vacating the title, I guess, yeah, you control the initial narrative, but it's so hard to get around these things anytime there's any announcement by USADA. And it wasn't USADA that announced it. It was TJ that announced it, and USADA confirmed it. So I guess there's something to that. But I don't know. This just kind of it bums me out. If not that I have an educated guess, but something that I've seen on Twitter and it kind of sounds the most logical to me is that he popped the test that they got him for is the day before the fight with Cejudo, and so maybe he had a diuretic in his system helping him get those last couple pounds or something like that, and a little bit was still left in there when they tested him. But even then, like, how dumb are you? But at the same time, I could see you feeling the pressure and saying, whatever, we'll take it now. And if we pop, we pop. We can't have this fight not go on, kind of a thing. So
Okay.
there's a lot to it. I'm hoping it's more than that. But at the same time, yeah, you have a fucking coffee table full of pills. And are all of those approved by the UFC? Like, I still don't know how there are people taking supplements that aren't approved by USADA or on that list or anything. Like, I don't know how stuff like this happens, and TJ hasn't said anything, USADA hasn't said anything, so it's hard to get any more like details on this, but it's nice to see it not holding up the division, at least. I guess if we're gonna, like, as me as the TJ fan is gonna find positives from this, at least he vacated the belt and the division's moving on, and we're not gonna get there's not gonna be an interim title, there's not gonna be when can he come back or will he come back. It's none of this stuff. If worst comes to worst, we find out what happens, he's back sometime early in like spring next year or something like that, and it's whatever. But it's nice to see that at least he can be put on the back burner mentally in terms of title talk and actual fights and whatnot.
Yeah, that does help when the champion relinquishes their belt and doesn't have to be stripped and have that whole thing happen. I mean, and I mean, how many days later do we get a bantamweight title fight scheduled? So yeah, so that was to the UFC's benefit. Yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, I will go behind the curtain here. We did have a theme segment that we're going to bring back for this week, but there's too much news going on, so maybe not this week, maybe next week, and that's all we're going to leave it at. But yeah, he joins a list of champions who have vacated their title. Yeah, he's a great fighter. And I hope it's not anything, too incriminating.
Do you think that this is good overall for the UFC or for I guess for the UFC overall? Because, Dillashaw Cejudo 2 was probably going to happen. And as interesting as that is to me personally and how much I would like it personally as a Dillashaw guy, Dillashaw Moraes is probably the fight they should have been looking to make, and same with Cejudo versus Formiga or Benavidez or however you want to do that. Is this kind of, even with Cejudo still moving up and it being a quote-unquote super fight, do you think this is a good thing overall for the bantamweight division, and maybe not necessarily the flyweight division, but the bantamweight division in the UFC overall?
I mean, that kind of prevents that whole rematch of a fight that only lasted 30 seconds from happening, which is nice. Right, that's a positive. And yeah, we get because bantamweight, they have a couple of really good top contenders. I mean, there's Aljo, there's Pedro Munoz, there's Marlon Moraes. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff there. But now we have Cejudo going up there, and flyweight now has like kind of a reason to close out, I guess. Now that if Cejudo's going to commit to bantamweight, so we'll see what the ripple effect of this is. But I like how quickly things have kicked off at bantamweight since then.
Yeah, I was wondering, they got to do like Sterling Munoz next, right?
Gotta be.
Because
I love that fight.
Well, and I initially was thinking, all right, well, it's going to be Moraes Aljo, done deal, blah, blah, blah. I totally forgot that Moraes slept him not that long ago. Like, that fight happened. Aljo doesn't, I mean, we were at that point, I guess, talking about Cejudo and Dillashaw getting a rematch, so maybe this doesn't have a whole lot of weight behind it, but Aljo getting a rematch with Moraes that quick just seemed kind of silly for the title. But and also Cejudo beat Dillashaw, so it's like you beat the number one bantamweight, so you getting the shot makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to hate on any of that, but I kind of see where the promotion's going with Cejudo Moraes more than I would maybe Moraes Aljo. I might be a little more bothered if they did that rematch instead.
Okay. All right. So now we can move on to Conor McGregor, another champion who no longer has the title. He is under investigation for sexual assault, allegedly, reportedly all the right buzzwords there. That's according to the New York Times, who conveniently posted it the same day that he was in the news for quote-unquote retiring on Twitter, saying a whole spiel about how he's retiring from the sport formerly known as mixed martial art and whatever he said.
Yeah.
And he kicked off the branding of proper pina coladas as well at the end of the tweet. So it was a weird day for Conor McGregor. And everyone kind of knew about the whole sexual assault thing, and now this is the first kind of major news source to be reporting on it. At first it was like some Irish tabloid reporting on it, but now this is the New York Times putting out a piece, so it kind of legitimizes it a bit. I mean, we don't know the details still. We don't really know much about it at all, but it's kind of a shame to see more of his legacy being tarnished as he stays away from the octagon.
Yeah, well, I mean, with this situation, it's hard to tell. But in general, is Conor McGregor's legacy being tarnished, or is he tarnishing it? Like, I don't think this is all. Yeah. I don't think the things that are happening are things that happen to him as much as they are things that he does. Yeah, this is an interesting one, because this is one that has been in the tabloids over in the UK for a little while because of privacy laws when it comes to legal situations in Ireland, where they don't report the names of people even if they're arrested and questioned, like Conor allegedly was. But the New York Times, the reason a lot of people are saying, well, I've known about this for a long time, or this isn't new news, or anything like that. The difference in the New York Times reporting it, and especially with their timing, and the reason, MMA media, the lame MMA media, the soft MMA media wasn't reporting it, is because we didn't want to get our fucking asses sued. Because unless you can prove that Conor McGregor, whether prove, quote unquote, with sources or have an idea that Conor McGregor's that guy, thinking that it's him and having people that would know tell you that it's him are different things. And the New York Times, with their strong legal team, has sources that they believe in strong enough to say that we can say that Conor is the person that is under investigation, and we'll let you sue us, and we'll be able to win. Mm-hmm. And MMA junkie and MMA fighting ain't that, and ESPN isn't exactly trying to do that with their the literal stake they have in Conor McGregor fighting again. So that's why it's a big deal, because no one had the sources or the balls to connect Conor to this in print and risk being sued, and the New York Times did, which means that there's some legs to this. And the fact that it's, when the New York Times and big publications and real journalists publish articles like this, they tell people like Conor McGregor in the UFC beforehand and say, hey, we're running this article. Here's what we're going to say. Do you have any quotes? Do you have any responses? So Conor knew, the UFC knew, and the fact that they undoubtedly knew, and then Conor retires right before the article goes out, or whether or not he retired right before the article went out, or he heard about it, retired, and then they decided to push the article out, maybe sooner than they had, because there wasn't a lot of new information for those that had read the articles from the UK. But at the same time, the importance of an outlet like the New York Times leaking it can't be minimized. So yeah, I guess we'll see how it plays out. We'll get to some fight announcements here, but I wrote an article for Cageside Press this week about potential main events for UFC 239 during International Fight Week in July, and I was not dead set, but I felt fairly confident in my Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz 3 pick, or some form of Conor McGregor versus blank pick. And things change quick in MMA, and I published that article on Monday, and now here we are recording on Wednesday, and it looks like there might be already a main event for UFC 239 that does not feature Conor McGregor. And there was a ton of huge fight announcements, obviously the last few days since we recorded last, but even just today. And maybe the timing of that is not so strange or weird. Maybe there's a little more purpose behind us finding out about all these big fights that are happening in the UFC with other stars that totally aren't allegedly under investigation for sexual assault. So, we'll definitely see what more of this plays out. It's hard to predict anything with Conor, quote unquote, normally, with whatever his idea of fucking normal is. whether that's running into Bellator cages or throwing monster cans or throwing dollies or, getting into brawls post-fight. Now with something like this hanging over, the retirement's such a weird thing because that obviously you phrased it as quote unquote retired, and I totally agreed beforehand. And now it seems a little more possible, or maybe not even possible, but he might just be in a forced retirement here for a little while, and that's I don't know. It's just so hard to predict where any of this will go because his PR team's response to it was also pretty small. Like they didn't really respond to anything. They mostly talked about his retirement and didn't really mention the sexual assault and just kind of played it down as tabloid rumors that have been out there for a while.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, we already knew this. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and you should already know it because he was arrested and questioned. So of course you know. Like I don't know. So we'll definitely kind of like the TJ situation. We'll find out more. And with TJ, it's obviously a lot less serious and it's easier to move on from it. It's easier to look at it from a sporting point of view and not look at it in any other way. If you want to call him a cheat or whatever, I guess that's kind of moral. But with the Conor stuff, this is different. This is serious. This isn't fight talk. This isn't other stuff. So, it's hard to predict how any of that kind of stuff goes because I mean, who would really be surprised to see him shoved onto the main event of a card sometime soon? With he's being investigated for something. That doesn't mean he did it. So. I don't know. There's just a lot of factors at play in this, and it's hard to predict any of it. So, I guess we'll once again with Conor, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, definitely don't want to make assumptions in a case like this. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens, and either way, it's deserved. So, also a quick note before we move on to fight announcements: Uriah Faber, he's coming back. He announced on the Ariel Helwani MMA show Fortnite. Whatever you want to call it. He said he's coming back, and he's been retired for quite a bit. And he's one of those, the latest of MMA legends to not quite retire completely. So he called out TJ Dillashaw, which, that ends up being moot now after TJ got suspended. But this is one guy I kind of didn't really want to see come back.
Yeah, I don't know if I would phrase it as announcing a comeback as much as, he's never left the USADA pool. He also mentioned that he's been offered a few fights like over the last, little while from the UFC. So while he's retired, it's kind of like, at least, with GSP, he has the balls to leave the USADA pool, which, I don't know, GSP probably prefers a little more time to come back, especially if he's going to come back at a lighter weight. So 6 months to prepare sounds good to him. But Faber, yeah, he's got his submission thing coming up, his grappling thing. And he obviously, I think he wants to come back, and I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back, but and there aren't exactly a lot of like barriers or boundaries to it. I don't know if I want to see him against Dillashaw, and obviously if he's going to come back against Dillashaw, that's a whole nother year from now. So that's to me, if Faber's got to strike while the iron's hot, kind of a thing. Like I don't think we have another 3 years of he's going to come back and fight 3 or 4 more times. I think we maybe have 1, maybe 2 if the first one goes well. I kind of want let's bring Faber out of retirement and get a guy who should be retired but basically is but kind of is in Dominic Cruz and have them fight again. I kind of wouldn't hate that. But yeah, we don't need him. I mean, as a Dillashaw guy, I would love to watch him beat the fuck out of Faber. Like that would not be fun for me. But I also don't need to see that. There's a lot of other things I'd rather watch TJ Dillashaw. A lot of other guys I'd rather see him fight than Faber. But if he wants to get it and that be Dillashaw's comeback fight next year, I wouldn't hate it.
Yeah, the rubber match between Cruz and Faber, years in the making. So, I wouldn't be opposed to that. Actually, they did have their own match. Never mind, I forgot UFC 99. Yeah, they did.
Well, because it was such a fucking forgettable fight. It was terrible.
It was.
And thank God, was that 199 or 198? 199.
That was the co-main for Bisping Rockhold.
Yeah. That was a fun little run of pay-per-views. But yeah, we don't. I'm asking for a 4th fight between the 4 and then shitting on the 3rd one because when they both take years away from fighting and come back,
Cruz
it'll be way better.
Yeah, that'll be fun to watch for sure. So now we can move on to the fights that have been announced this week, and I mean mostly today. So UFC 239, the main event is as expected, or as expected, as in who gets the light heavyweight title shot, John Jones versus Thiago Santos. And I mean, yeah, you pointed out before, you kind of hinted at it. This is coming out after the Conor news, so it was kind of like, all right, our biggest star is under sexual assault investigation. Let's pump out fights one by one tonight, and they did. They announced this one: Holm Nunes, Woodley Lawler, bunch of fights being announced tonight. So this is the big one. He's the biggest pay-per-view star outside of Conor McGregor, and he headlines International Fight Week this year. So Thiago Santos, a well-deserved title shot, and this didn't go the way that people thought it would go this morning when John Jones was kind of, teasing fans with calling out Stipe Miocic for July, and then this happens. He's fighting in July, but not against Stipe. So, I mean, what do you think about this whole situation at light heavyweight and John Jones, his title defense against Thiago Santos?
I'm glad he's staying at light heavyweight. I think John. We talked about this a little bit. I think after his most recent fight, where I think taking out Thiago Santos and maybe one more light heavyweight would be good, because he said he wanted to come back and defend the belt, and he won it in December, and defending it twice in the first next 7 months is doing that. Like, he's definitely been active and kept to his word thus far. But as far as Stipe goes, I guess we'll get to the promotion thing. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for them to go to Jones immediately as soon as Conor's out. Hey, who's the guy that's been drawing 3 of our 5 biggest cards in the last couple of years? Let's get him on the main event.
Yeah.
But I'm not positive that it's going to end up being the main event. Dana White was on Robbie Fox's new podcast. He's a guy at Barstool Sports. And he was talking about this fight because he was I think this was on Monday was when it came out. So the interview was probably sometime over. It was after UFC Nashville, so the interview was actually probably on Sunday. But he was asking him about Conor being in the main event of International Fight Week of 239, and whether it was Diaz or Pettis. And there was a lot of talk about Conor being in the co-main event without a belt. And Dana in the interview said, well, we're trying to get a heavyweight championship on that card. So you think Conor without a belt should be billed ahead of the heavyweight championship? So maybe don't close the door on DC Brock being the main event of UFC 239. Because I think I can't imagine another fight that the promotion would put ahead of Jones Santos right now. Mm-hmm. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And if you do that, you can get very creative with what you do in the next, for the rest of the year. Because if you do DC Brock, there's been a lot of talk about DC retiring at 40. He just turned 40. So you do DC Brock on the same card. Jones beats Santos, hypothetically. Then you have whether DC wins, he could win, and then potentially vacate the belt if he wants to and retire there in the ring after one of his bigger paydays. If DC wins and doesn't do that, you could do Jones DC later in the year, probably Madison Square Garden for the heavyweight title, if Jones really wants to move up. If DC loses, Brock wins, he becomes the champ, he vacates immediately. Brock isn't hanging around for multiple UFC fights. That's not what this is about. So Brock vacates, and if DC loses to Brock, it's kind of hard to imagine him fighting again, especially to come back and fight for if he came back at heavyweight, would he fight for the vacant heavyweight title that he just lost? Or would he go down to light heavyweight again, which wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think if DC loses to Brock, he also retires. So if Brock wins, there's a free heavyweight belt. And if DC wins, there's a 50-50 chance that there's a free heavyweight belt. If DC's still there and still wants to fight at the end of the year, John Jones will be there, assuming that he beats Thiago Santos, and you have your champion fight. But if that belt is open and DC is gone, Jones Stipe for the vacant heavyweight title makes a ton of sense. And so I think that maybe Jones was angling, playing, who knows how the negotiations went this morning, because it seems like stuff's moving pretty quick in terms of fight matchmaking over there today. But I think Jones is maybe angling for something longer down the road against Stipe, depending on how everything at 239 shakes out. And, maybe maybe they can't do Brock. Maybe Brock doesn't work out, and the heavyweight championship fight that Dana was referring to is DC Stipe. And if Stipe beats DC in the rematch and then Jones is there, I just feel like that was maybe some future angling from Jones, knowing that a move up to heavyweight is potentially on the cards this next year, and also the fact that both belts could be on the UFC 239 card.
Yeah, I don't want to rain on that parade, but if the heavyweight title does get on UFC 239, it would be one of those surprise kind of things like they did at UFC 200 with Brock. Because Dana White did announce it today on ESPN, and he did say that it was going to be the main and co-main event. Those two fights they announced as
Dana says shit all the time.
So I hopefully, I mean, if it does end up having a Brock fight on it, maybe like this time it won't get spoiled by Ariel, and we can all enjoy that big news. I mean, I wouldn't mind that. Having DC, Brock, Jones, Santos, Holm, Nunes, that's a hell of a card.
Yeah. It's hard to complain about any of that. Yeah, well, especially like you said, Holm Nunes there for the 135-pound title, which, like we mentioned this before, it's kind of crazy that hasn't happened already.
Yeah.
And it's a little early. There was a lot of talk about Nunes wanting to come back later in the year, and fighters get antsy, and if she's feeling good, like I don't know, I think I like this matchup a lot. And for Holm, she had her fight with Aspen Ladd pulled not that long ago, and it seemed like it had to be for this, and everybody was expecting it for 235 in May in Brazil, or 237 in May in Brazil. But this makes sense, and it could totally fit as the co-main too. If they don't end up putting another title fight on there, it wouldn't be weird. Not as that. I think it's also interesting that they have Luke Rockhold making his light heavyweight debut on this card as well against Jan Blachowicz, which is a really good fight. That's a fun fight. That's a tough test at light heavyweight, and it's a fight that if I just went through all the machinations of heavyweight and light heavyweight, but if the light heavyweight title is either vacated or John Jones wants to defend the light heavyweight title again at the end of the year, and Rockhold comes off of a win over Blachowicz, I feel like it would be very easy to slot him in, because light heavyweight, as I have said basically every week since we came back, is dog shit. Light heavyweight is bad. It needs someone like Luke Rockhold in it to spice it up a little bit. I think at the top, someone with a little more experience than Johnny Walker or Dominic Reyes to add some fresh blood in there. And I don't think it would be a tough sell, even with one light heavyweight win, to do Rockhold Jones sometime at the end of the year either.
Okay. Yeah, then that'll come against Jan Blachowicz, as you mentioned. So this 239 card looks solid so far, and Rockhold definitely has the frame for 239. He gets a solid test in Jan Blachowicz. I mean, Blachowicz is he's there to be hit, but he's also a very, very skilled fighter, and he loves to throw down. So can Rockhold withstand that light heavyweight power? Because this is a different beast. Moving up, it might help, but you're not cutting as much weight, and that might help your chin in that sense because you're not as dehydrated. But I mean, it's just those are different. That's a 20-pound difference.
He's also coming off of some surgeries and getting healed up and getting fixed. We haven't seen Rockhold in a while. He was supposed to fight, I think, in November, and they called it off. Was it November against Weidman or December or something like that?
Yeah.
So maybe that time off will be good for him because that's a nice long break, and he's not exactly young either. So, kind of in my mind, I'm kind of thinking what we saw from Wonderboy, where the time off did more good than harm for a guy like him. But yeah, that's a tough one that he's definitely gonna have, and he was similar on the Ariel show where he was, talking shit about basically everyone else except Blachowicz. He was talking shit about Anthony Smith and Gustafsson, and Blachowicz was kind of the one where he was very respectful of. And yeah, no, he likes to keep his chin out there, and Blachowicz will make you pay for that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then, so that's a good setup for UFC 239. We'll see where the card goes from there, but yeah, definitely a great start for International Fight Week. And UFC Rochester, the Octagon's coming to Western New York. Kevin Lee versus Rafael dos Anjos is the main event. I messed that up before. I was saying about how he's going to fight Ponzinibbio. I forgot he was going to fight Kevin Lee. He's scheduled to fight Kevin Lee, main event of UFC Rochester. this is Kevin Lee moving up to welterweight. I mean, sees the success that past lightweights have been having. Masvidal, Dos Anjos himself, Anthony Pettis now, and he's going to try his turn at that. He's had some trouble with weight cuts at 155. He's a very big guy for lightweights, so now we'll see how that translates to welterweight. And he doesn't get the biggest welterweight out there. He gets one of those kind of 165ers in Rafael Dos Anjos. But this is a very good fight, and I think, in my mind, one that favors Lee.
Really?
Stylistically, I mean, you see the guys that have beat Dos Anjos lately. It's Covington and Usman, and Kevin Lee's kind of in that same grain.
Do you think so? At that, I mean, Kevin Lee definitely isn't going to be a tiny 170 guy, and RDA is stature-wise on the smaller side. I mean, RDA still gets up there around 200 pounds. I'm worried more about the feet, being on the feet for Kevin Lee. If RDA is able to keep the fight standing up, I'm not sure what Kevin Lee is going to have on the feet for a guy like Rafael Dos Anjos. And I mean, we've seen Kevin Lee, or we've seen wrestlers do good against Dos Anjos. We also just saw Ali Quinta, who has good takedown defense and good striking. And it was a close fight. But we just saw Ali Quinta defeat Kevin Lee not that long ago too, and obviously that's at 155, and Lee will be bigger. But I'm not really sure which way I'm leaning. But I don't know if I'm leaning any way, I'm probably leaning RDA, kind of leaning on the striking a little bit, because even if Lee's able to get him down, I'm not sure if he's gonna be able to do a ton from there. And also, I guess over 5 rounds too, I'd probably like Lee's gas tank a little bit more at 170. So I don't know. To me, it's a very, very interesting matchup. To me, it's definitely going to be Lee's wrestling versus RDA striking, and where you see the fight happening will probably dictate who's winning the fight there. But to me, that's just super fun matchmaking to give, similar to what they did with Pettis at 170. Hey, you're up here now, and take one of our toughest guys that we have, and see if you can hang. And I'm definitely interested to see how he looks up there, because if Kevin Lee goes up to 170 and looks kind of like a shittier striking version of Woodley, who does more on the ground, just kind of like just a big dude who can use his long arms to control the fight in different ways, that's gonna be really fun. But I kind of want to see it first. And RDA is a guy who at 170, even though he's had some tough losses, he's fighting the best of the best up there. And if you're going to challenge and be in that same kind of title picture that Lee was almost in at 155, you better be beating the RDAs of the world at 170.
It's just kind of a stylistic thing for me. I mean, RDA excels when he's able to pressure guys, and I don't really see him doing that to Kevin Lee. I mean, Iaquinta was a bad stylistic matchup for Kevin Lee. Iaquinta's he has great takedown defense, and that's kind of Kevin Lee's game. And he wasn't able to establish his game plan against Iaquinta, but I can see him kind of overwhelming RDA for 5 rounds in this one. So we'll see. That's going to be one of our disagree fights.
RDA's got some ground skills too.
He does.
I mean, we can transition to the next fight that kind of got announced. I mean, you can ask Neil Magny how he feels about RDA's ground game. And I don't know, taking down that bowling ball, it doesn't seem easy. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how far it gets, because I think the later that fight goes, definitely the more it favors Kevin Lee in that one. And in the main event, those are some deep waters you got to go into.
Yeah, I like it as a main event too. You can tell how much the UFC respects Rafael Dos Anjos.
Yeah.
That fight that he mentioned was Zaleski Dos Santos against Neil Magny. You can say this is his first high-profile fight for Dos Santos, and it's well-deserved. He's been winning like crazy in the UFC, and he just came off a very good win over Curtis Millender. He gets a good fight against Neil Magny, and it's finally time. It's nice to see guys that are kind of quietly rising up finally get that step up in competition, because there are guys like Kamaru Usman that kind of take that slow road up to the top, and it's finally good to see them get that matchup like Usman did against Damian Maia when he finally got that recognition from the UFC. So this is kind of like that for me. I mean, obviously Neil Magny's not a Damian Maia, but he is a top 10 talent. He has been for a while. So I like this for Dos Santos. It's a good opportunity for him.
Yeah, hopefully it actually happens though, because the UFC announced it I think yesterday, and they've both since come out and said that they haven't signed anything. So this is another situation where the UFC might be getting ahead of itself a little bit, and obviously they've had a lot going on
Yeah.
with fight announcements. But yeah, no, I like the matchup a lot, and it's a good test for both guys. I was kind of rooting for Chiesa Magny at 170. I was hoping that was kind of set up next, but this is pretty fun and not a lot to hate on.
And UFC 238 has its main event, Henry Cejudo versus Marlon Moraes. We've been mentioning it kind of throughout the episode. But yeah, it got officially announced, had the UFC, generic announcement poster and everything, for the vacant bantamweight title. And this is an interesting one. Henry Cejudo is a great fighter, but Marlon Moraes he's a killer. Like he's been really tearing through the bantamweight division and finishing guys as well. So this is a tough welcoming back to the bantamweight division for Henry Cejudo. But he's a champion for a reason. I mean, he knocked out TJ Dillashaw, and you don't do that by accident. So I don't know. I don't really know where I'm siding on this one. But this is a great way to get that bantamweight title back in the mix.
Yeah, I'm kind of bummed too because I really wanted to see Dillashaw Moraes. I think that's a fun matchup.
That's
but to me, but this one kind of checks a lot of the similar boxes because I think obviously we'll take Cejudo on the ground in his wrestling skills, but Marlon is no joke on the ground either. I'm interested to see how Henry looks at 135 because we talked about Dillashaw at 125. Cejudo looked cut too. Cejudo looked really, really good. And with another 10 pounds, that could be dangerous. And obviously his striking, we didn't get to see a ton of it against Dillashaw, but his striking has improved a bunch. So I don't know. I'm interested to see where this one goes because, Henry's style, Marlon's, I think, is going to push forward a little bit, but Marlon also knows how to be patient too. He's fought tough guys. He's fought quick guys. I think a lot of the problems that maybe some bantamweights would have with flyweights, like some of the speed issues and other things like that, I don't think Marlon's going to have too much of an issue with that maybe other guys at 135 would have to deal with because he's fought some pretty quick guys in the past and is pretty quick himself. But I'm not really sure which way that's going to go. But I like that as the main event. That card, it's a little bit sooner than 239, about a month before in early June. And that card's filling out pretty good. I like it. Cejudo Moraes. Shevchenko Jessica is in a great fight, but you got to do stuff with that flyweight division, title. Yeah. Then Tatiana Suarez, Nina Ansaroff, Chukagian Calderwood, which we talked about.
Those are both great fights. Yeah.
And they this week announced Taito Ivasa versus Blagoy Ivanov, which I think might have been one that we mentioned. Might have been one of the for Ivanov after his who did he just beat?
He beat Rothwell.
He beat Rothwell. I think that was one. That might have been one we mentioned. So it's nice to see him get a win and get back in there quick. Yeah, that card's signing up too. Chicago's pay-per-view looking like a fun one.
Yeah, that heavyweight fight kind of has messy fight written all over it though. So we'll see how that ends up. UFC Fort Lauderdale, Sunrise, Miami, whatever you want to call it. Li Jingliang is injured, and he will not be fighting the Brazilian cowboy Alex Oliveira. Violence gods not really wanting us to get too much violence in Florida, but Mike Perry has replaced the Leech. So I guess violence is still on the menu, but not as much, I guess. We'll see.
Well, maybe more. I don't know. Mike Perry's he's as Florida as it gets.
Jingliang, though, he's violent.
I think Mike Perry has violent crimes on a literal record.
That's true.
True. If we're gonna talk about actual, but no, yeah, I was sad that fight got called off. I was bummed when I saw that Leach was off there. But if you're gonna sub him with someone, Mike Perry's a pretty fun step up. Like if you're gonna Mike Perry, Alex Oliveira does not sound like a bad time to be in. That card is full of bangers, and it's nice that they were able to find somebody. And this kind of fight just kind of screams Mike Perry too, where. No one's really thinking about him. Everybody excited for this fight, and all of a sudden, bam, he's in there in a big fight, in a big moment. And this is, watch him go in there, and I'll definitely take Oliveira, but watch Perry go in there and steal a win in a fight that he wasn't even initially a part of, and see what he does with it.
Yeah, Oliveira certainly a safe choice in that one. UFC Stockholm will get Volkan Oezdemir versus Ilir Latifi. So it's Volkan versus the bowling ball. Volkan coming off that tough decision against Dominic Reyes, and Ilir Latifi he had a good run going, but recently had it stopped, if I remember correctly. Who did he lose against? I'm drawing a blank right now.
It was someone not that good because it's at light heavyweight, and light heavyweight is dog shit.
That's a good point.
Yeah. No, it was somebody in the like top 10, but I remember it was somebody also not that impressive. We have to say as
Corey
many things.
Anderson. It was Corey Anderson, which is
did I
the
hit
perfect
the
description
nail on the head. Yeah. That also goes for half of the light heavyweight division and 2/3 of the heavyweight division. You can use that for a lot of different fighter descriptions.
Yes. So yeah, that's a good matchup as far as the end result on Fight Night will go. Two guys coming off a loss that need to get back in that top 5.
Well, and they're on the same card as Gustafsson, Anthony Smith, which I think is always fun. I like having 2 or 3 fights that, especially that are top 10 guys. And yeah, good for Volkan getting back in there. Hopefully he can get a little bit more consistency to his schedule. Obviously not consistently losing, but consistently getting in the octagon, getting in camp and improving. Definitely pulling for him in that one. And yeah, hard to hate on that one at all.
And UFC Minneapolis will have a rematch as its main event. Tyron Woodley versus Robbie Lawler. I mean, first time we saw this was during Robbie Lawler's title reign, defending his title against Tyron Woodley, and got knocked out in round 1. So will we see a repeat of that first performance, or will we see something new since it's been a long time since that first fight?
Well, if this was the rematch they were going to go with Robbie Lawler, it's not the one I would have expected.
Yeah.
Obviously, we were not that people were really expecting Askren, but they kind of went the exact opposite. Maybe not the exact opposite. Maybe okay. So I guess there's a little bit of a story there because they could have Askren and Woodley are homies. So I don't know. I'm trying to find something for this to make sense, but it really, really doesn't. I don't get this matchmaking a lot. Like, Robbie obviously looked really good against Askren, but to put him in there against a guy like Woodley, like I know Woodley looked really bad, but Lawler's technically coming off of a loss, and you're giving him a guy, a former champ. I don't know.
This knocked him out.
Yeah, knocked him the fuck out.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This one doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me from Robbie Lawler's point of view. I guess you're going back in there against a tough guy who maybe his confidence isn't as high as it once was, and you're feeling good, and it would be a big win, and it's a guy that beat you in the past, so there's that. But this just kind of, I don't know. It's a weird one to me, and for Woodley, I'm happy for him because it could be a nice rebound win, and he'll get it before the summer and get back into that welterweight title picture sooner rather than later. But it's a goofy one for me. I didn't see that one coming. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about it just yet.
Yeah, I mean that welterweight division, this kind of doesn't really help solve anything. But yeah, we'll see what their direction they're going with Ben Askren is, if they're going to try to make that Masvidal fight.
Yeah.
Anyway, or because Leon Edwards is out there too. So
well, no,
there's options.
Well, there's a bunch of stuff apparently that they're looking at Askren Masvidal, and that Dana doesn't believe in Masvidal Edwards being like an interesting enough fight, even though they've literally already fought each other.
Yeah.
So apparently Dana had quotes about that too. So apparently they're looking at a different direction. I wouldn't hate Askren Masvidal. Honestly, I think that's pretty interesting as well. Probably more interesting than Masvidal Edwards, but at the same time, Edwards' time is coming. They can give him another top 10 welterweight, and he'll figure it out.
And lastly, we have UFC Ottawa, Cub Swanson versus Shane Burgos. Cub Swanson is on one of those runs where he's just fighting great competition. I mean, he's lost to Brian Ortega, Frankie Edgar, and Renato Moicano. No shame in any of that. And thankfully, they're giving him a bit of a step down in competition, and he's fighting Shane Burgos. Because I mean, there are guys that have losing streaks, and they just keep on fighting top competition after top competition. And Burgos is a very good fighter. Don't get me wrong, but he's not in that top 10 level that the guys that Cub Swanson has been fighting is. So, stylistically, I love this fight. These two guys are bangers, and I think it's a good opportunity for Cub Swanson to get back in the winning streak, or for Shane Burgos to establish himself as a guy to pay attention to at 145.
Yeah, I like this a lot, and I'm surprised that you're so down on your boy. He's from the Bronx. Like I figured, I don't know shit about New York. I don't know if that's anywhere actually near you, but
not quite.
He's from your neck of the woods, the Bronx. Like how are you? Yeah, No, I like this fight a lot. This is a really, really, really fun fight. And yeah, Cub Swanson lost 3 in a row fighting killers. But he's always game. But I think I'm gonna go the other way on this one. I think I'm on the Shane Burgos bandwagon. One loss in his career. Obviously, he's only been in the UFC for a couple years now, but his one loss is to Calvin Kattar, which isn't isn't
And that was
bad.
a great fight. That was a
fight
fight
of the night, and he rebounded that with a first round submission over Kurt Hollabaugh last year in November. So he's got wins. The UFC also likes him. They've put him on 3 pay-per-views and a Fox card as well. So they like putting him in situations where people are going to watch. So yeah, I don't hate it. I like it a lot. It's a fun matchup, and it's nice to see them. This is one that, maybe a lot of guys like us wouldn't have put together necessarily, and it's always nice to kind of be. I would much rather be surprised with a Cub Swanson Shane Burgos fight than I would be a Woodley Lawler 2 fight. I'll put it that way.
Okay, that's fair. Now we get to UFC Philadelphia, which we were talking about earlier, that we are looking forward to a lot. That's on ESPN this Saturday, UFC on ESPN 2, not ESPN 2, the channel. This is the second UFC on ESPN event, so it gets confusing. But Edson Barboza versus Justin Gaethje is the main event, and that's as good as it gets. I mean, if you like leg kicks, get ready for some leg kicks, because these are 2 of the top practitioners of leg kicks in the UFC, and I don't expect anything less than a fight of the night here in the main event.
Yeah, and there was a really fun article on ESPN today interviewing guys that have fought both of them and talked about how fucking terrible getting kicked in the legs by both of them are. That was a pretty fun read. But yeah, I think this one, it's easy to point out the leg kicks because they're both so good at them and use them so much, especially when compared to the rest of the UFC and MMA in general. And I don't want to sound, lame or like I didn't try and think about this fight in an interesting way, but I think the leg kicks are going to be really important. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they use them, because I think it's obviously we saw in the Pettis Wonderboy fight just how important they can be, and how the damage that you take over time you may not notice, but it just takes that one slip up that maybe you wouldn't have if your shin wasn't throbbing, or if you could put pressure on it. Maybe you're able to dodge that kick or that hook or whatever a little bit more. But yeah, it's, to me, it's going to be a battle of Gaethje. He's going to want to move forward. He's going to kind of do the Pettis. I think it's going to be kind of like the Pettis thing, where he puts his hands up, going to absorb some shots, going to counter, and he's going to try and slow Barboza down. The thing about it is, Barboza doesn't do great going backwards. It's hard for him to he's got insanely fast and powerful kicks. Everybody knows that. But they're a little slower and a little harder to throw when you're moving backwards, especially if you've also been getting kicked in the legs. So to me, Barboza then, needs to go forward. It needs to pressure Gaethje a little bit. He needs to throw more. He needs to jab. He needs to keep Gaethje off of that front foot to where he's just in that zombie mode that we saw against Poirier and Alvarez, where he's just in there doing the blind weave with his head covered and then throwing a 1-2 with a kick behind it. I think Barboza needs to avoid that, because Barboza doesn't have the power that Poirier does or Alvarez does. He's not probably as good of a boxer as those guys are. He's got good speeds. He's got quick hands for sure. But I think that you need more than that against Gaethje. Either that, or you need to use it consistently and a lot. And I'm just not sure Edson's going to be able to do that. I'm not sure he's going to be able to control the pace with his jab. I'm not sure he's going to be able to land it maybe as much as he needs to in the ways that he needs to. And I can kind of see Gaethje going through, getting used to the hits, and maybe establishing his game more. And then if we ever see him go to the ground, I think not obviously, but I think Gaethje has the advantage on the ground if it somehow ends up there in some fashion. But I'm not sure we'll ever see that from a Gaethje fight, because he just hates utilizing all of his skills. But I think it's going to be that. I think it's going to be if Barboza can do that with his jab and with his kicks and pressure Gaethje a little bit, and then that opens up other things. If Gaethje is able to think, or if Gaethje is forced to think about more than just plodding forward and countering with huge combos and kicks, if he has to worry about a jab or getting interrupted in the middle of his counter or something like that, then maybe Barbosa can do a little bit more. Maybe he can catch him stepping back or not being able to plod forward and hit him with a kick or work the body a little bit. But I see this being one of those where it's just a bad matchup for Barbosa, which to me it kind of fits the Gaethje mold for guys that he can beat. Like obviously Edson's tough, but Edson is a -135 favorite, which I was not expecting in a matchup like this. Yeah, so I'm taking Gaethje. I think that he's gonna win the battle of the leg kicks, and I think Gaethje can win this fight in more ways than Barbosa can. I just don't think Barbosa going backwards is the way that he's going to be able to win this fight, and I think he's going to end up going backwards. I'm not sure he's going to be able to slow Gaethje's, stalking him down or anything like that, especially if Barbosa's running around and taking leg kicks for those first couple rounds and backing up, and then all of a sudden his legs are also tired and hurting. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Can't wait. Arguably one of the best fights of the year, obviously, but hopefully it lives up to it. I'm excited for it.
Over under 2.5 takedowns from Justin Gaethje.
Fucking under. Does he even have 2 takedowns in his UFC career?
No.
I would take under 1. Like, he is totally just not that guy. Also, remember, Edson is the guy that he was calling out when he first came to the UFC. When he first signed, he was saying, I want to fight Edson. I want to fight Edson. And they were like, eat up this Michael Johnson first, and we'll see what happens. And then he gave us that fight, which was amazing. So, I don't know. I'm glad we're finally getting this. But yeah, I don't expect maybe knockdowns from leg kicks. I could see him catching Barbosa and him going down like that. But I don't know if we'll see any takedowns.
I mean, this can be a great fight out of the way. I think he might be underselling Barbosa a little bit, but this is like the violence gods are giving us a gift on this weekend. I mean, this UFC ESPN card doesn't have quite the name power of like the first ESPN card and other cards we've seen during this era, but these are fights that are going to deliver. That really look like they're going to deliver on the entertainment front. We got David Branch versus Jack Hermansson in the co-main event. Josh Emmett, Michael Johnson, Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Michelle Waterson. Debut of an exciting prospect, Kennedy Nzechukwu against Paul Craig. He throws flying kicks and shit like that. So watch out for that fight. And Sodiq Yusuff versus Shaman Marias opening up the main card. So this is a fun card on ESPN. And what do you have your eye on?
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of stuff. To me, the one that stands out the most, I'm a little underwhelmed, honestly, by this card. Like you said, it's definitely missing the name power, but it has the great main event. Casey Kenny going up against Ray Borg on the prelims on ESPN Plus. I think that's interesting because Ray Borg was fighting somebody else. I can't remember what the name was. I deleted it. I can't think of who it was now. Fuck. But he was fighting somebody at 135. They got pulled, and Casey Kenny won the interim LFA bantamweight title on Friday.
Kyler Phillips just
Kyler
came to
Phillips.
me.
Yeah, Kyler Phillips, who was also making his UFC debut.
Yes.
Instead, he gets another guy making his debut on less than a week's notice. So it's always interesting to see big steps up like that. So see how Casey Kenny does against Ray Borg and Ray Borg's bantamweight debut. So a big fight there, a lot going on. The Shaman Marias, Sodiq Yusuff, that's an interesting fight at featherweight. A couple of interesting up-and-coming guys in the division that's surprisingly stacked. And obviously Kowalkiewicz versus Waterson. Very interested to see that. I have a feeling we'll pick separately on that one. Are you leading? Are you going with your girl?
Of course. I mean,
she's going to get her ass whipped. Kowalkiewicz is tell me, not that you necessarily think she's going to win, but how does Michelle Waterson win that fight?
Because her daughter sold more Girl Scout cookies than Karolina Kowalkiewicz did.
They'll be in the clinch, and Kowalkiewicz will be controlling her, and then Waterson will just get the strength of the Girl Scout. And
yes.
Be like,
the strength of the
power
samosas. Yeah.
What if we go in there and obviously Waterson is usually has an amazing body. What if she just looks terrible? What if she misses weight by 14 pounds and just looks like she just
too many Thin Mints, man.
Yeah, there's just constantly crumbs around her and everybody's wondering what's happening, and it's just because she has a storage unit full of cookies she has to get rid of.
Yeah. There were a lot of cookies that were bought from the Waterson household. I think Dana White bought 1,000 boxes and Tony Robbins matched him. He bought 1,000 boxes too.
Wow. That's an interesting duo. That's a weird lunch. That's what that is.
Yeah.
I think that one's good. And then Josh Emmett versus Michael Johnson is also a fight that I have no clue about. Because, Josh Emmett, strong.
It's been a while since
good striker. Well, and his last knockout was rough. And Michael Johnson, Michael Johnson is the definition of, like, always looks pretty good, but never looks great or even really good. Especially, like, his run at featherweight has also been interesting, I guess. I'm kind of surprised it still lasted this long. I wouldn't hate seeing Michael Johnson come out on top in that one. I've always been kind of a Michael Johnson guy, and it seems like he needs one. But I don't know. That's one where I'm not sure about anything with that fight. I'll be interested to see how it goes, but hopefully it delivers. But yeah, this one really, it kind of follows the theme of the last few weeks, where it's all about the main event. And I'm not trying to sell Edson short, but I've always liked Edson. Obviously, he's super fun and has the great knockouts, and is a for sure top 10 lightweight. But Edson is definitely one of those guys that in certain situations just doesn't do well. And obviously it's hard to hold the Khabib fight against him, and Kevin Lee is very, very tough. But Dan Hooker had some decent success against him. Like, Dan Hooker also took an ass beating.
He did.
But and Dariush, he got him with the knee. I just think that Gaethje can do some of the same things that some of the bigger guys that Edson's fought can do. And also, Edson's been around for a long time. He's been in a lot of fights. He's not the oldest, but I don't know. I just think that this matchup wise is something that, like, obviously he could definitely win. I just think that matchup wise, this is just kind of in Gaethje's wheelhouse.
Yeah, I think Edson is kind of spoiled by pressure fighters. That those typically don't really do him any good in the octagon. So that's Justin Gaethje's bread and butter. So
he's also just been shown to be pretty limited on the feet, like with his hands. Like I think some of the guys, the level of striking that we've seen against Justin Gaethje recently, whether it's from Poirier or Alvarez, that's top-notch shit. And obviously James Vick isn't that. But I just don't think that Barbosa, as fast as he is with those hands, I don't think he's going to be able to kind of unlock the Gaethje code, which is just beating him to holy hell until his zombie corpse kind of can't take it anymore. I just don't think that Barbosa has the power in his hands or necessarily the boxing skill to be able to do that, and also not get beat up. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to do both those things. Because, I mean, even, Poirier and Alvarez definitely took their lumps in those fights. I think one of them, Alvarez's eye was almost fucking, or maybe, I don't know. I get the Poirier, Gaethje, Alvarez triad of fights mixed up constantly, because they're all, like, the same guy fighting the same insane fight. But I just think if Gaethje is able to absorb that damage from those guys and still deliver that, if he can put on a performance like that, I think he comes out on top in that one.
I believe you have swayed me. I'm on Gaethje's side now.
Well, now pick opposite in the Slack chat. Pick the opposite. Actually,
okay.
You know what? Barbosa's gonna heel kick him into next week because Gaethje just loves getting hit. He's gonna go out there and just beg for one on the chin right away. There you go. You know it.
Man, you're playing that in my head now.
He's not going to fucking take him down.
I can definitely see him getting caught with that. Yeah.
Well, and it's not like there's been, 2 of his last 3 fights where he's been beaten up by wrestlers pretty good. Definitely now watch Gaethje's going to go in there, shoot a double leg in the first 30 seconds, and catch a knee Dariush style and just get fucking obliterated. Now, this is why this fight is so great, is because as much as I just went into, like, for me, fairly in-depth analysis of this Gaethje Barbosa fight,
it's gonna be madness.
Well, and like we could also have a Masvidal where Barbosa runs out there and kicks him in the dick in the first 30 seconds, and Mitriones him, and then we don't get the fight at all, and we would all have sat through 6 hours of other shitty fights just for that moment.
One more thing before we move on to one championship, we had the male half of the De La Rosa marriage fighting on this card. It's Montana De La Rosa and Mark De La Rosa. He'll be fighting Alex Perez in the first fight of the night. So if you were not aware of that husband-wife duo in the UFC, he is on this card. So that is one final note for UFC Philadelphia. Now we can move on to One Championship, A New Era. That is on March 31st in Tokyo on Sunday morning / afternoon for the United States on Bleacher Report Live. I believe this is the first event on that platform for One Championship. It's got 4 title fights, a champion versus champion fight between their female champions, and 6 total belts being fought for. So, we've also got on this card the debut of Mighty Mouse in One Championship, the debut of Eddie Alvarez, and we also have Gary Tonin on the undercard of this card. So this is pretty stacked. It's as stacked as it can get for fights outside the UFC.
Yeah, I think the only other One Championship fights I've ever tuned in for live were Ben Askren and Tyler McGuire. I've never made One Champion. I've found highlights on different things, but I've never actually made sure to wake up and tune in. I think I might have to do this for this one because the main event is the lightweight world championship, and that's Shinya Aoki, a guy that we've seen fight before.
Of course.
Against Edward Folayang, a person I've definitely heard of. But you mentioned there's 4 title fights, and the reason there are 6 belts is because the co-main event is for the strawweight championship, but it's the atomweight champion versus the strawweight champion, the women's division for both. So there's 2 belts in that title fight. The middleweight world championship, so it's not a super fight in the middleweight world championship, but it is a champ, Ong Latin Song. That's the guy we couldn't. And I
the
totally
capital N. Yeah.
He's defending his middleweight title. He's got 2 titles. He's defending the middleweight one against Ken Hasegawa. So there's 2 belts on that one, but it's just one up for grabs, obviously, with one guy holding 2. And then the women's super fight ahead of that. And then behind that, there's the bantamweight championship as well. So that's all after you get Mighty Mouse's and Eddie Alvarez's debuts. And the thing about Eddie Alvarez's fight and Mighty Mouse, both of those fights are their Grand Prix quarterfinal fights. So just a lot going on. And I don't know, they're obviously going to be well aware that people are going to be tuning in for the, kind of the first big event of this new One Championship era, and they wouldn't be putting 6 of their belts and their 2 biggest new signings on the card if they didn't want attention and weren't going to put a lot into it. So I'm going to tune in. I'm excited for it. Like I said, I don't have a whole lot of expectations, and I've heard of Angela Lee in the women's strawweight world championship.
She's great. Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not really familiar with a whole lot else. So thanks to Jay for making this part of our fucking picks championship this week.
I don't know about that.
Some bullshit. But it's all good. I'll be fine. But yeah, I'm excited for this one to tune in and not really to go in it kind of fresh and blind and see how it goes, because it should be pretty fun regardless of how much I or other people are really aware of who many of these people are. And then as you mentioned, Gary Tonin, the BJJ guy, getting the featherweight fight on the prelims. So a lot of fights, should be fun, and kind of a really good weekend as we get ready for our first weekend off in a while before we go into UFC 236 in a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, you're in for a treat, because I've watched a handful of One Championship cards, and it's pretty much guaranteed entertainment. They really throw down over in Asia, so it should be a good one this weekend. Definitely, they have the best of the best on this card. I mean, this would be wild if the UFC did anything similar to this. I mean, it's one of those things that would make you wonder, who the heck's gonna fight next week, and they're really pulling out all the stops with this card, and then they really want to, put a stamp on this new era that they're bringing in. They've been building up with these huge signings. This, Sage Northcutt, Sexyama, Vitor Belfort, the whole litany of guys they've signed, and this distribution deal in the U.S. too. So this is a huge event for One Championship, and they've got the fighters to back it up. So. Yeah, they're really going all in. I like to see promotions do that.
Well, not a bad time to get on the bandwagon. I don't know if you're someone like me who's never checked it out before, but if you've sat through enough fucking Bellator cards, it can't get much worse. So sitting through something like this is a lot easier too when it's on your phone and you're in bed, and if it sucks, you can just go to sleep. But Yeah, I like it, and it's a good jumping off point for, I think, for a lot of people like me, and maybe kind of a similar thing that the UFC did with ESPN earlier this year, kind of a, hey, if you haven't watched us before, watch us now. Here's the super fight. Here's kind of the top end of our product, and obviously you'll be getting a lot of that with this. So yeah, join me, and we'll see what this one championship is all about.
Yeah, Bellator had a press release sent out this week for Bellator 219 or something, or I forget which one, but it had post limbs announced on the press release, and I've never seen post limbs announced officially, because that's usually like, oh, prelims that we couldn't fit time for, but they actually have like a good chunk of fights that will be scheduled to take place after the main event and not be televised and all that stuff. And Dave Rickles is part of that. Dave Rickles, who's fought for Bellator like forever.
Caveman Dave is not on the. Is this because the crowd?
He's on the post limbs.
So does that mean the crowd in Thackerville just deserves like such a fucking treat, or like where?
I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's enough note. Bellator for this
episode. There's also a Bellator card this weekend on Friday, but Lorenz Larkin Kreshkov got canceled, so it's a bunch of, it's not a great card.
No. And before we go, Michelle Waterson does not look like she's been beating Thin Mints. I mean, if you check her Instagram, she is definitely in fighting shape.
I'm sure you check her Instagram quite frequently, Danny.
She's on my feed.
I'm sure she is. I am sure she is. You fucking creep.
You can check out our written work on CageSidePress.com and follow us on Twitter at Throwin Elbows, iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. Throwin Elbows, MMA. Same day, same place next week. We're out.
Peace, people.